Welcome back to Normal But Not. I'm your host, Krystal Sentinello, here to explore the messy middle ground of what's considered normal, but maybe shouldn't be. Today's episode takes a deeper dive into boundaries and attachment styles, topics we've touched on before, but with a twist. How do you actually feel boundaries in your body? How do we process emotions? And what can we do to feel them successfully? To help unravel this, I'm thrilled to welcome Kyra from Embodied Woman. Kyra is an expert in somatic healing and emotional processing. Through her work, she empowers women to resolve their trauma, establish and maintain boundaries, and flow with their emotions through somatics. She teaches her clients how to create structure and safety in order to process trauma, feel feelings, and heal, to return to feeling vibrant, have nourishing relationships, and a connection to the vibrance of life. Kyra's journey is inspiring, and I know you'll take so much away from her perspective. Oh, and she's got an upcoming workshop you'll definitely want to hear about. So grab your tea, coffee, or wine. We're about to get real. All right, Kyra, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Calgary, Canada. How are you doing up there?
Good. It's beautiful. It just snowed, so it's like a winter
Oh,
wonderland.
I always love the first fall when everything is still white before the slush hits and the gray kind of creeps in.
Yes. Yes, or here it's kind of brown. So it's always nice when it just snowed.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. Today in Los Angeles, we started out at 39 degrees Fahrenheit and it got up to 79. Nice
Okay.
40 degrees difference. And I did not travel from the beach to the mountains, I promise. So let's start with your story. Actually, let's backtrack for a second. For those listening who don't know what somatics is, what is somatics?
Yeah, I love this question. So, somatics, the root word of it is soma, and soma in Greek means body. And so, somatics is referring to processing through the body, often compared to psychotherapy or traditional talk therapy, where we're using the mind to be able to process our experience. And so, it's a body based approach for healing.
And that's really important. I've done, therapy where I have been so much in my mind.
Mhm.
And I think the first time I had ever discovered my own anxiety, I remember describing it as though my thoughts were going around in a revolving door that weren't stopping. So to have something that in your body to help you
Mhm.
out of it, amazing. So can you share with us what led you to this work?
Yeah. Well, in short,
You can be as long as you want. We can edit anything out.
like there's a whole meandering journey that I went through. But yeah, so experienced somatic work more through movement, Laban movement, Bartinieff, Alexander techniques. These are all somatic movement methodologies that support mobilization, release through the body. And yeah, first experience of that, I really wasn't interested. I thought it was boring. And then fast forward later in life when I started getting involved in five rhythms and conscious dance and how movement and breath work can merge together to create this really beautiful transformational healing. Um, then somatic started to revisit me in it just kind of showed up in my field and through different coaches and practitioners and was something I sought out for my own healing journey and trauma resolution. And then yeah, specifically got certified in somatic attachment therapy and somatic experiencing to support me to do the work I do today.
That's amazing. I think it's really important that you stated when you first came across that somatic experience and you were like, no, not for me. I mean, I don't know about you with your clients. I mean, I'm guessing when your clients come to you, they're ready for the somatic experience. I've had clients where I work with a bunch of different modalities, and sometimes, you introduce something and they're like, I don't know about this one. Do you
Right.
ever have that experience in your practice as well?
More often with parts. Most people come to me knowing we're going to be working through the body, we're going to be moving. It's a little bit strange and on the outside of traditional healing modalities. Often, when I introduce interrelationship focusing and parts, not IFS parts, but parts by Jean Genlin, um, people are often like, what do you mean there's a part of me? Like there's just me. And so that is always an interesting journey to take with someone to get them to see, oh, there's actually different parts within me that have their own emotion and sensation and, can even have conflicting agendas. And yeah, and I can
Could
watch and witness them all.
Oh, wow. Could you speak a little bit more with an example about a part that has an emotion?
Yeah, totally. Yep. So let's say someone wanted to go on a really beautiful, fancy date at a nice restaurant and their partner got sick. A part of them could feel really disappointed that they don't get to go and experience this luxurious dinner and time of connection. And that could feel like heavy, and maybe that's felt physically in the chest space. While another part could be feeling understanding and sympathetic that their partner is sick. And that could feel more, maybe a little bit higher towards their heart center. And then there could even be another part that perhaps feels a little bit angry because the relationship hasn't been prioritized. And that
Hmm.
could be felt maybe in the throat, or there's a bit of bracing in the body, a bit of tension in the shoulders. And so all of these parts and felt sense, meaning sensations in the body, all of those can be happening at the same time. And depending on which one is the loudest, one can think, oh, I'm just angry or I'm just disappointed. But really there's a nuance and yeah, multiple ingredients in the stew of feelings.
I could see why a coach would really help, piece that out and bring that out because the person's really like, I only feel this in my throat right now. And
Yes.
that I know I'm so angry, I just want to scream. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, well, what else are you feeling? I mean, coaches really do so much for their clients. I mean, you've mentioned to me before, and whether it was here or right before we got on the call, working with other coaches
Mm-hmm.
and practitioners. And I've done the same, whether it's helping, with my business or it's helping with my own mental health and well-being. It just sometimes you need that other person to get you there. And, I talk a lot about people pleasers and as people pleasers, a lot of my clients have come from living or being around a narcissist. And so they have
Mm.
had their voice silenced for so long. So to work with somebody who's like, oh no, I hear your voice, whether you hear it or not. I mean, that's
Mm.
got to be so amazing and your work that you're pulling that out of them as well. Because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times we speak with our bodies. I mean, statistically, 7% of what we say is only in our words.
Mm-hmm.
90,
Yep.
the other 93% is in our body language, which is one of the reasons I switched to video. So I can do things like this. Um, so
Totally. That also, just to throw this in there, we have our verbal communication, affect, how we like gesture, and then neuroception, which is how we sense other nervous systems in relationship to ours. And that's like going even beyond sometimes our conscious logical understanding. We can be sensing and feeling the nervous system of someone else, which is cool.
yes. Yeah, I mean, I wonder how many listeners out there
Mm.
I'm going to put a poll in the podcast. I'm wondering how many listeners out there feel other people's emotions
Yeah.
physically. when somebody walks in a room, does your body change? Have you sensed that? Like, do you feel someone else's energy? And sometimes, like, we say this often, especially I don't know about you in Calgary, but here in Los Angeles, we're like, oh, I'm vibing off of you. Like, I feel your light. Like, there's an energy
Thanks.
that you're.
I love it.
Yeah. And that, like, I mean, I have made it where before I don't think I realized it, but through all of this work that I've done on myself, I'm like, I don't want to be surrounded by anybody who is not giving me good vibes.
Yeah.
And those are those like that energy, that energy vampire, like you're saying, that
Mhm.
somatically can pull energy from you.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, one of the things too, I love your Instagram and I'm going to put your Instagram in the show notes. We're going to talk about it. It just offers so many great information and material out there. And you talk a lot about flowing with your emotions instead of suppressing them. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm curious, I definitely want to hear more about that, but talking about you, was there a moment? I know you said you worked with other people, but was there like a moment where you just had like this clicked for me? This is my aha, like everything kind of fell into place. What was that for you?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's kind of, it feels like twofold. I have my personal lived experience where I realized, hey, I'm actually not processing, digesting, alchemizing this emotion. It's either just being pushed aside and I'm gaslighting myself or bypassing the emotion, or suppressing it. And so when I actually had an experience of feeling the emotion, being able to hold it as it is without running away, shopping it away, whatever, exercising it away, and actually feel it and watch it come and go, that was a moment of like, ding, ding, ding. This is possible. This is real. Everything I've learned in Vipassana, read in Osho made sense, like from a embodied place. That feels like one fold. And then the second fold has been continuously unfurling in my like full embodied conscious awareness, seeing clients go from
Mm.
having this much capacity for their anger or their grief or their fear to that growing a little bit more, growing more to the point where they're like, oh yeah, anger's here and I can feel it and it's red and it's hot and it's tense and I'm curious about it. And they can ride the wave of the emotion and then come back to their baseline, their regulated place. And watching a client do that and have that experience over time, over developing that inner knowing and ability has been like another bing light that's gone off.
It's really amazing to see that kind of thing happen with your clients. Absolutely. I've done it with
Mm-hmm.
meditation and Ho'oponopono, which I don't know if you would actually call it somatic, but just, really putting your clients in a place where they are sitting with the emotion and the experience. I think so often in our day to day, we do exactly what you said. You're gaslighting yourself. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten to a point where I'm like, I know the emotion is there. You have a
Mm-hmm.
right to feel this way. However, you're going into a meeting with somebody. You don't have
Yeah.
time to cry. You don't have time to
Yeah.
sit in your emotion. Like you need to put it down. You need to like
Yeah.
come back to that later. I will meet with you at 11:33 p.m. today and then we'll revisit that emotion. And
Yes.
sometimes you just, you're not giving yourself time to process it and you come back and, it's not ready to come up then. And if you
Mm-hmm.
keep
Totally.
treating it that way, it starts to build up
Yeah.
and it really needs that release.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I love what you said about being in it, but there are many of us who I feel are, kind of afraid of feeling their feelings. Um,
Yeah.
I had a breath work instructor say emotions only last for 90 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that also your take on it?
That's what I've heard as well. Yep.
And it's like if I could deal with something for 90 seconds. It'll be okay. Or it doesn't feel like we can handle the 90 seconds. So we'll
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But I did promise at the beginning of this episode that we were going to talk a little bit about boundaries. We were going to talk a little bit about attachment styles, which I see you always, talk about on your Instagram. And we've been talking about that in the past episodes. And what we haven't talked about though is how our bodies hold on to those emotions that I was talking about. Like they build up and we keep hanging on to it. And then how that impacts our ability to set healthy boundaries. So can you break that
Yeah.
down for us?
Yeah, totally. There's so many layers. So the first thing that's coming forward that feels the loudest for me is around conditioning. So we're conditioned into how we relate to our emotions. So if we grow up in a family dynamic where we have an avoidant caregiver who's better at dealing compared to feeling, then we might learn from their way of relating to us, their behavior, their relationship with emotions, that it's actually safer to just, go work out or do homework or push the feeling into a little box in the bedroom or go be by ourselves and feel it and then come back and be productive.
Or in some
So we
people's cases, sorry to interrupt, but like you named a lot of healthy things. And then
Mm,
some people might decide like I'm going to go have a glass of wine or I'm going to go to the bar and drink. And so there are also those unhealthy avoidant behaviors as well.
totally, yeah. And I would even argue that when we use something like exercise or work or sex, let's say, while it is a healthy behavior to like move our body and have sex and, work on our business, these things are good. When we're using it as a way to escape an emotion, the same pattern is happening as if we were to use drugs or alcohol. It's a different coping mechanism, but a coping mechanism nonetheless. And
And
I was a pattern of over exercising, like getting on the treadmill to run, thinking that was processing my anger, but really it wasn't. It was just escapism.
yeah, and it can actually, those healthy or disguised as healthy ways of escaping can
Mm-hmm.
trick us into being in those patterns longer because
Yeah.
they have a societal view of, well, what you're doing is healthy. It's fine. Like, look at what
Mm-hmm.
wow, she's exercising. She's putting all of her time into building a business for her family or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Yep.
When if someone was drinking, somebody would probably have an intervention for you sooner than you
Uh-huh.
working out, especially if you're maintaining a healthy body weight and nothing's looking unhealthy on the outside.
Exactly. They're a little bit sneaky. Yeah.
Really glad you pointed that out. So I know I cut you off. I think those were good things for our audience to hear too. So avoidant styles.
Yes. Yep. So we can learn from, and that would be kind of mirroring that avoidant that we see in the caregiver. Whereas sometimes our attachment adaptation in response to an avoidant caregiver could be to be more anxious, like I have a lot of feelings, I don't know what to do with them. They come up and they're overwhelming, they lead to panic or hypervigilance with what is my caregiver feeling. And then we can become hyper focused or fixated on the emotional landscape. And again, not giving ourselves the time and space to be able to self regulate and process the emotion. And then when we get into disorganized, anxious avoidant, then we have that kind of like the push and pull experience. And with emotions, that can play into, maybe my anger is okay and that is tolerated, and then my sadness isn't, and my joy is okay right now but then not later. It becomes an unpredictable pattern of, is this okay now, is it not okay later? And so then our emotional landscape can become destabilized and we can feel disorganized around what we feel inside, which is
being
compounded
really
by
out of
the relation.
and being really out of touch with our emotions and
Yeah,
intuition around that as well.
exactly. Yeah, where it just becomes chaotic inside, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, so I think like conditioning understanding that we can be conditioned into how we're relating to our emotions. And while that might sound bad, quote unquote, there is hope in that, because when we're conditioned or we're nurtured into something, we can create a new pathway and pattern. We can orient towards a healthy relationship with our emotions. We can shift into secure attachment within ourselves, with others, and how we are feeling.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Like if you wanted to get, if you had a map, a treasure map, and you saw like, oh, the treasure is at X. Well, you can't get to X if you don't know where you're starting. So by being able to identify your starting point on that map, whether it's anxious, avoidant, or disorganized attachment, that gives you the starting point on your map to get to secure attachment. So look, we are who we are. And that's from often well-intentioned patterns and from growing up from our parents. Like we grew up in a generation where our parents, like even regardless of generation, every parent or most parents, I will say, are well-intentioned. Like they want what's best for their child. They're just doing what they are doing with the tools that they have. And we turn out the way that we do as a result of those tools. So identifying where you are, that awareness helps you with that roadmap or that treasure map to get to the end, that desirable place. I really appreciate the way that you explained the attachment styles. And, is there a way to, to feel in your body, like if someone's listening and they're like, I don't know what attachment style I am. I've thought about it and thought about it, and I have a headache because all I'm doing is thinking. Is there a way that you would say, oh, this is what it might feel like in your body?
Curious. Well, the thing with attachment adaptations is it also depends who we're in relationship with. So if we are in a relationship with someone who has a secure attachment, then we might orient towards more secure. Our attachment adaptations might shift. Whereas if we're in a relationship with someone who's highly anxious, then we might develop more avoidant attachment adaptations. Or if we're disorganized, avoidant, fearful, we might lean more towards that avoidant style. Same as if, when we're growing up as a kiddo, our attachment adaptation is happening as a result of our caregiver. And that can be reflected in our adulthood, if we end up choosing a partner that reflects that. However, and that's why Diane Poole Heller uses the word adaptations, because
I like that.
we're adapting to the ecosystem that we're in. And the healthier the ecosystem, the more secure, the more we can orient towards that. And that also creates that hope piece, because if both people are working towards orienting their own systems to secure and doing that in tandem, the relationship can shift, the ecosystem can change.
And that makes perfect sense. I mean, you can even adapt to what you said, the person that you're around. So it's not necessarily like, oh, well, I'm secure attachment style. Well, it's like maybe I'm secure with my partner, my romantic partner, but at work, I'm anxious because my boss is disorganized and I don't know what's going to happen next.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
That
And so I would say, like, if someone's curious about the felt sense of an attachment adaptation, if that person has not yet developed attunement to their own felt sense, physical sensations, how their emotions manifest, the energy moving through their body, that would be step one. And then step two would be to look at, okay, when this happens in the relationship, what do I notice? Am I collapsing? Am I caving in? Am I not making eye contact? Do I feel like I need to get small? And then checking, is that maybe more within the realm or wheelhouse of avoidant? Or maybe there's more tension and kind of more grasping, desperation feeling. And maybe that's more in the wheelhouse of anxious. So checking with the sensations and then the attachment adaptations that have been defined and seeing, does this resonate? Am I checking out? Am I, moving towards with panic and anxiety? Am I not sure, kind of push and pull? And is that felt in the body as high anxiety and tension, and then complete collapse.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, the dissonant, I don't know if that's the right word, but the emotions that are kind of conflicting and the
Yes.
feelings, right?
Hmm.
You know, the things that you're talking about too, I think back to there was a time where I had a boundary crossed and I had I needed somebody else. I wasn't searching for it, but it took somebody else externally to be like to identify why I was crying, why I was upset. Like I could feel like my
Mm.
shoulders were tense and my chest was just like it had so much pressure.
Yeah.
And I was describing the story, and my coworker at the time was just like, Krystal, I think like it seems like you're upset because somebody crossed your boundary, like physically
Mm.
came into your room when
Yeah.
you had said, I'm busy right now. And
Yeah.
then this situation was a little out there and I was berated for something that I didn't even do and like not even who I
Mm.
am as a person. But
Right.
what, I was like aware that the things that she was saying, I didn't take personally.
Mm.
But I was so upset and I could physically feel it.
Yeah.
And it was that this boundary had been crossed.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to feel boundaries in your body? And maybe it's not just when they're crossed, but like, oh, I set a boundary. I feel it. Like you
Hmm.
talk a lot about feeling boundaries in your body. So what's your take on the
Yeah.
feeling them?
Totally. Ooh, I love it. So a lot of what I've known from an innate intuitive place was put into words and conceptualized by Peter Levine's work, the creator of somatic experiencing. And he describes boundaries as a felt experience. So they're happening in our body. They're not something that's happening just in our prefrontal cortex. It is a whole limbic system, brainstem felt experience. And when our boundaries are crossed, we feel that as a rupture within our somatic field. And so, for example, and this gets kind of out there, but we can feel that there's been a boundary rupture in the right front side of our being. And it can feel like, if we're using imagery words, like someone tried to stab us, or there's like a boot coming towards us, or energy coming towards us in that space. And we would have the impulse to maybe put our hands in that right frontal plane.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and this is more in the realms of if someone's crossing the boundary, then we feel that directionally, but then also usually in parts of our body, like coming down or frontal, side, back body. For me, my boundary rupture was in my back body. So repairing that, I often had to put something around my body or get against a wall or picture someone behind me with a hand out saying no. So our inner sense of boundaries, the felt experience of that is also it's visceral. It's a feeling of like the edges of my body are the boundary, but then also the kinesthetic fear. So the energetic sphere around our body is what is felt from the inside. And so when a word comes into that, or a mean face, or something physical, or something non-physical like a car, that's felt within our sphere and then also within our physical form, skin, flesh, bones.
I love that. And as I'm hearing you talk and I'm watching you,
Mm-hmm.
it's so great. And I kind of like moving the right side of my body. I'm like, oh, I've felt that before. It
Uh-huh.
feels familiar, unfortunately. And I'm
Mm.
also watching you and thinking about, children and
Yeah.
how they feel like I have this like bubble, right? Like this is my
Mm-hmm.
bubble, stay out of my bubble. They have that analogy for the boundary, and you're talking
Yeah.
about that sphere.
Yeah.
And, kids know a lot of things and they are
Mm-hmm.
conditioned to ignore
Yeah.
their natural understanding of how things work. And I also had this memory of you're too sensitive, like something pokes your bubble, something
Mm.
pokes your sphere, and you
Yeah.
get that visceral reaction. And there's an adult being like, stop being so sensitive. It's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it like, that was my ping aha moment just now. Like, wow, it just
Yeah.
all clicked and connected in your
Totally.
description right there. Really good
And
stuff.
this makes me think too, like with a comment like that, or in that realm, you can see a child's physiology respond to that, whether that's shown through affect in their face, like, eyes get droopier or smaller, or the cheeks get more deflated, or maybe they tense the face and get a little bit more braced and rigid, or there's a collapse in their sternum, like that. Those words are having an impact. And if it's a young person who's vulnerable in a relationship of, I trust you, you're here to take care of me, that can rupture some of those boundaries. And without knowing how to say, like, hey, no, that's not okay, I'm not too sensitive, don't say that to me, then that can become imprinted on the physiology of, I'm too sensitive, or my emotions don't matter, or what I feel needs to be suppressed or squished so that I don't get made fun of.
Mm-hmm. And then that's that adaptation that stays with them until adulthood.
Yeah.
And I know a lot, I have several clients who are working on those adaptations now because, they grew up with a narcissistic mother or a narcissistic, parent who was really about their emotions and not their child's.
Yeah.
And it's, it's a hard road sometimes because that's the person who loved you, who was just, trying to, I believe that you have a parent who looks at you and is like, you're fine. And it's with the best of intentions, maybe. I mean, with the narcissism, they are focused on them because it's like, well, I can't deal with you being upset right now.
Right.
And it's also, there is still a layer of like, I can't have my child be upset right now. I don't want you to be upset right now, because there is a societal piece of what we started talking about from the beginning. If you are having a negative emotion, push it down. Like, no, it was very rare. And I think it still kind of is rare for us to know how to feel that negative emotion and be okay with feeling that negative emotion. So, like, what are some ways that people can use the body to kind of help with the healing process? Because the mind will, because of all of the patterns that we've learned, the mind will be like, you're fine.
Yeah.
You're just being sensitive. So how can we use our body to let us sit in it? I often use the phrase like, find comfort in the discomfort. That is a mind trick. But what is a body trick?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the foundation of the work that I do is curiosity, non-judgment, moving towards acceptance, and attunement. And so when we start to build that up in our system, already that starts to support feeling the feelings. When we're talking about through a body perspective, if we have let's say, a sensation in the chest of collapsing down, maybe it feels tense, bound, and there's despair, right? We can mirror that. This is one way to validate it through an embodiment practice. We can mirror that. Okay, if I curve my body in and I feel the weight of my bones going down, I'm getting in touch with that felt sense, and also bringing it from a place of it's just existing within body and mind into more of a physicalized manifestation. For some people, that's not mirroring it through physical form isn't as effective. So we can take it into expressive art. This is like the seed of art therapy, where we're bringing that. What is the color of that despair? What is the shape of it? How does it actually feel as a gesture to make that movement and pull whatever's inside outside onto the paper? That's another one. I work a lot with, in my own practice, voice. Like, what does despair sound like? Is it or is it just a there's all these very subtle nuances that when we start to even ask the question, what does despair sound like in my breath or in my voice, we're going beyond logic and reason, and we're looking at, how does this feel, and can I spend some time here allowing it to be explored in a way that feels safe, comfortable enough, and mobilizes some of it, allows it to move.
Yeah, the movement, the getting it flowing sounds really important. And is there science behind getting that emotion moving?
Ooh, I don't know if there's like a clinical study of it. I'd be so interested to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like even in like chakra work and yoga, like there's all this like
Yeah.
breathe into your chakra and there's
Mm.
like meditations where you're breathing into different muscle groups in your body. There's a lot of, I mean, it works. So
Yeah,
there's got to be some evidence there somewhere, right?
totally. Well, yeah, like in SE, somatic experiencing, when we're working with something like boundaries, we do the push hands, right? Pushing hands out, saying no, pushing hands into a wall, feeling that sympathetic arousal and mobilizing some of that fight, right? When we're in a sympathetic state of fight, we're moving towards saying, nope, can't do that. And so there is that theory behind that work of when we're doing the movement and we're physicalizing it, it's supporting the
Hmm.
discharge of the sympathetic. It's supporting the discharge of the frustration, the anger. And so, same, when we're allowing our body to find the movement of it, it's allowing discharge to happen. It's allowing something to be felt, to mobilize, so that we can come back to baseline, that state of ventral vagal regulated nervous system.
Yeah, that's, you did this. And I have a client
Mm.
who, when I was coaching on trying to like change the thought patterns,
Yeah.
I was in college for psychology and we did like the CBT with the idea of snapping the rubber band on the wrist, right? Like that was one of
Yes.
the things that we were talking about. I was coaching her and like, well, what will help you in like changing this thought pattern?
Mm-hmm.
And she came up with change it, the words, but she also kind of gestures this like physical, like change it,
Uh-huh.
physical movement. And she even said, she's like, I need this physical movement in order to
Yeah.
teach my body. Like, and it's what you're saying, that like that hand motion, that boundary, like
Totally.
push it away.
Yeah.
So it's, back to that thing, that statement I made about like our children, like we intuitively know things.
Yeah.
If we just stop thinking so much and move and do it,
Yes.
we can get back in touch with those things.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you have been saying so many great things, and people listening might be like where you took your first somatic dance class and we're
Mm.
like, this is stupid. And I think most people listening, I'm hoping, are like, this all sounds amazing. What's something I can do right now to make sure that like this
Mm.
works? And then I can go to Kyra, then I can go to her workshop. I'm in, but like I want to test this for myself and just like know that I can do one thing for myself. Is there something that like this is the time people can like jot this down or try it themselves? Like, do you have
Mm.
one of those things for us, Kyra?
I would say try the mirroring first. If you're able to notice something's feeling off or icky or challenging or painful, first step, maybe you go to your feeling wheel and say, like, oh, I'm feeling disappointed. Mapping that in the body of like, okay, what part of my body is feeling that disappointment? It's my stomach. And then what movement would physicalize that? Do I need to curl up into a little ball? And that feels like the disappointment is being felt or heard, and can be different with, literally all the feelings in the wheel.
Yeah, totally. When you were doing that before, when you were like hunched over, you couldn't see me because your eyes were closed. But
Uh-huh.
I like also hunched my body over and I was like, oh wow, this totally feels like that. It
Yeah.
it's a really great exercise. Like
Mm-hmm.
feeling there is also a somatic thing that people can do, that superwoman pose, the superhero pose,
Yes. Yes.
right? So
I
like if you
forget the
want,
name of the therapist who she did her whole thesis on standing in these big poses before the interview to induce a feeling of confidence, pride, security. I'll have to send that to you to put in the
yeah.
notes. But
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
all of these the references that you've been making about the different psychologists and the books and things that you've read, send it all. I'll link it in the show notes because I'm sure people are curious. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like So what we're talking about is, and we'll find the psychologist name. So we are not stealing anything. This is cited work.
Yeah.
Where, you stand and your legs are wide and your feet are spread wide and you can put your hands on your hip. It's like, Superman, or you could spread your arms out. But like if you're feeling nervous or you're feeling just insecure or sad, if you want to feel the opposite. So just like Kyra was mirroring like, oh, this is what, disappointment or sadness feels like, and curving her body. You do this and you make your body really big, you can feel like confident and ready. And, other adjectives. Do you have other adjectives, Kyra?
Yeah. Well, I mean, anytime we're
Powerful.
using our distal points to go like reach into space, that's gonna activate how we feel in space, right? If I reach my hands out, I might feel powerful and strong, or I might feel like, holy shit, I'm actually moving my body into space and claiming a lot of space. So that would even give you information of where you are in terms of embodied space taking.
Yeah. Maybe you're not ready to take all that space yet. Maybe
Yeah,
you've
or
been
maybe there's a
shrinking
part.
down.
Yes,
Yeah.
maybe there's a part that needs attention.
That part. Yeah. So now you've got this upcoming workshop. Are you going to be talking about the parts in your upcoming workshop? What can people expect? Is there still space in the workshop? Tell us about it.
Yep. Yeah, there's definitely still space. And we're going to be talking about why we have emotions, why they're useful, how they relate to the nervous system, how to process them in a way that feels safe instead of overwhelming, different creative ways to try, because every person is unique and every emotion is also unique. So, that mirroring that we were talking about may work really well for anger. And then when you're sad, it's more effective to find the breath with that, or the voice. So yeah, we're going to be talking about processing and then also just answering questions, because find the best way to shift something or to create a new pattern is to take our own lived experience and get curious about it and dissect it and get some feedback on that. So that's what's going to happen.
It's amazing. The interactive workshop pieces are so helpful. And even if you're not one of the people who's being able to ask questions, watching someone else ask questions and have them answered, I think is tremendously helpful. So,
Totally.
And is this something that's going to be recorded if someone can't make it during that time? Amazing.
Yeah, they could just reach out to me on Instagram or email.
I'm so excited. Well, I'm definitely going to check it out as well. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate having you here today. All of the wonderful tips. One of the things that I always have to remind myself of is no matter how much growth and progress that I make, it's never done. So hearing you talk about this, I'm like, oh, I'm definitely going to like do the mirroring and do it some more and then journal about it and write it down so that I remember that these are the things that I feel, so that I can, be aware when what I feel like when someone's crossing a boundary. I'm going to rewrite the bubble thing and draw a whole circle of my spheres. All of it was so amazing. So thank you. And I hope that everyone else feels the same way. I'm sure that they are taking and jotting a bunch of notes about everything you said today. They can rewind too, which is great.
That's true.
Yes. So for anyone who wants to connect with Kyra, you can find her at embodied_woman_ on Instagram, or join her upcoming mini course, Emotion Codes. And we will link her Instagram and her upcoming course in the show notes, along with all the other things that we talked about. And if today's conversation resonated with you and you're ready to start setting guilt-free boundaries or explore your authentic self, check out my free cheat sheet called Setting Boundaries Without Guilt. Book a one-on-one workshop, and you can find all my details on Instagram at Complete Coaching with Krystal, or krystalsentinello.com, which you can also find in the show notes because you might not know how to spell it all. So thanks again for listening to Normal But Not. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, share it with your friends, And catch us on the next episode. Until then, keep redefining what's normal for you.